What's going on, Alpha Males? Welcome to Alpha Male Podcast, where we talk about what it means to be a man the right way, made in the image of God, strong, dominant, and in control. And I don't apologize for that. Today's going to be a little bit different. I thought I would tie in the nomadic lifestyle that my wife and I live into this episode. I've done an entire episode with my wife. I think the only full-length one I've done with my wife on Alpha Male, where we talked about our nomadic lifestyle. You may want to go back and give that a listen if that's what interests you. But I've been blessed to be in 49 of the 50 states. Hawaii being the only one I haven't been to, I believe. Fairly certain that is true. And I have lived in a lot of them, like a staggering number of the states I have lived in. I signed the papers for the Marine Corps at 17. I have been pretty much living a nomadic lifestyle since then. And especially the last several years with my wife since COVID and her job going remote and me switching over to doing the podcast full time. We've been traveling a lot and living in a lot of different parts of the country to see where we liked, where we didn't like. So I thought I would share it with you guys. This is my list of favorite towns in the United States. That said, this is my list with the criteria that are important to me. I'm not saying that my criteria should be important for you. So let me lay out what some of those are. You can decide whether or not they apply to you. Okay, so I consider a city, I'm going to consider a city anything more than 50,000 people. 50,000 people to me is a big city. And you might think, oh, that's a small town. But let me slap you with this. I looked up the population for London in the Middle Ages in like the mid-1300s. 40,000 people. When you think about knights in shining armor in Europe and like the capital, London, of Britain, 40,000 people, right? I just stopped in Bozeman, Montana. It's got more than 50,000. And I would consider that a city. I'm not talking about cities today. I'm talking about towns. Now, London, I think, may have had a population greater than that before the Black Death ravaged it. But anyway, for me, if I'm making the list, I'm going to consider 50,000 too big for me. It's got to be under 50,000. Also, to keep my wife happy, and my wife is a very simple lady too, but I'd say more than a few thousand people, more than just like a gas station and a post office. Enough to have a fairly decent, healthy economy. And for me, one of the big criteria is, now a real nice to have for me is a gym. Now, I can work out in the wilderness, or the gym is not a make it or break it, but it's a really nice to have. And I think all but one of these kind of have a gym. And the one still has a gym, but I could never catch it open. So maybe it was closed down. It didn't say whether it was or not. But a gym for me is a real nice to have. A gym, right? Because I can work out in the wilderness, out in the wilds. I stopped last night in Deadwood, South Dakota to go on a ruck. But if I'm going to have to put up with cities or towns, I want a gym. You can get a lot done in a little gym. That's on you, not on the gym. But if I'm going to have to deal with the people, I want a decent sized gym to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about here. Also important to me, I don't actually like being in the towns very much. I like being out in the wilds around the town. That is what's really important to me, and that's when I was thinking about this. I thought about this a lot last night. I was doing a lot of driving, and I went to record last night, and I thought I should wait because I was really tired, and I thought it would be a garbage episode. And I don't just do this to put out garbage content. So I started doing some more thinking. Something they all have in common. They all have wild areas around there in which I can be free. And this may or may not apply to you. I know a lot of people that listen to this listen to Gunfighter Life podcast. That's by far the more popular of the podcasts. But I'm not going to assume that everybody listening to Alpha Male listens to Gunfighter Life. But guns are a big thing. I've been a professional gunfighter most of my adult life. Have gun, will travel. By God's grace, I'm heading back to hopefully start another private contract soon. Anyway, that said, guns are a part of my life. They're like a part of my day-to-day. So you might think these are all going to be great 2A states, but not necessarily, because that's only part of the equation, right? A freedom that one cannot exercise is not a freedom one really possesses, I think. Like, it's fine if you have freedom in theory, but if you can't actually exercise it, then you don't actually have it. Right? If they say you have the right to freedom of religion and the right to peacefully assemble, as guaranteed by the Bill of Rights, and then they say, oh, but not during COVID. You can't go to church. You can't preach during COVID. You can't gather. Which, a brief aside, I will point out, they did know what germs were back then. Maybe not exactly what we did today, but they did understand contagions, because this was written after the Revolutionary War. And if my history is correct, George Washington helped develop a smallpox vaccine and gave it to his troops so they didn't get decimated. So they were aware of actual disease and pandemics. Like, smallpox is an actual pandemic that kills a lot of people, and they had just lived through that, and they guaranteed the right to peaceably assemble and the right to freedom of religion. But getting back to the point, if you cannot exercise a right, do you actually have it, or you just have it in theory? I don't want a right that I have in theory. I want a right that I can exercise. A lot of people have guns for different reasons. A lot of people have guns to hang on their mantle, or guns to say, I'm for this political party and I got me a gun, and that's all fine and good, but that's not me. I use my guns. I like to train with my guns. I like to shoot my guns. And how that ties into today's episode is that let's say when I lived in Florida, I traveled for hours in Florida and I was not able to find actual public land or an actual, let's say, fairly, even if I had to pay free range, where I could run around, like literally run and shoot targets while I was running, setting up moving targets, setting up different ranges, different scenarios, things like that, right? I'm not talking about a static range. If that's how you want to shoot at an organized range where you pick the gun up off the table and shoot, that's fine, but that's not me. But tying into today's episode, I want the free and open range, open land, public land, where I can just go out and be free. And it doesn't even have to be shooting. It can be hiking. And I don't mean hiking on a trail with a bunch of people. If you want that, then, go live by Zion or something. I can't stand that place. It's beautiful, but I have to stand in line to see nature. No, thank you. It needs free land where I can go and be free. Maybe walk for days and not see a single human person. Once I get a fairly, somewhere I can go near that town easily in a quick day trip, even a part of a day trip after I get work knocked out and I got an early afternoon, and I can say, hey, I'm going to go up in the mountains or out in the desert and be free. Go foraging, go hunting, go shooting, go fishing. And not at a city park, out in the wild. So this is all going to have that in common. And with that, and I thought about it, but every single one of these is going to be west of the Missouri River, west of the Mississippi, even west of the Missouri. And I tried to think of some, and I've lived in some of the wilder places in Tennessee. I just spent some time in West Virginia, as I did as a boy as well, and Virginia, and I even moved, and this was a life lesson for me, talking about the freedom not being able to exercise. When I was younger, and they started, maybe it was already in swing, but when I had started getting into hearing about the Free State Project in New Hampshire, the Free State Project and Libertarian, I thought, oh, that's great, I'm going to move. And I literally did. I literally packed up and moved to New Hampshire from Idaho. And I was miserable because although in theory they have all these good laws, it's just not conducive to freedom. It is more free compared to Massachusetts. It's more free compared to Connecticut, right? New York, certainly, but it's not free compared to Idaho. Not even close. So I may have a thing on the list that doesn't have the best Second Amendment laws, like gun laws, like I have to have a 10-round magazine, but I can actually go out within 10, 15 minutes of one of these towns and go shooting. Like off a dirt logging road where it's totally legal and nobody's going to bother me. And I could hike for days and not see a person. That's important to me. Not that I want this, but I would rather have a handgun, and I think this might have gotten overturned recently in California, but I'd rather have a handgun with a 10-round mag that I can actually go out and train freely and set up targets and practice shooting on the move and actually go out and just shoot instead of having to go to some gun club and follow a bunch of rules. Not that that's not good sometimes, but I don't want to do it on a day-to-day. So I want the freedom in the open spaces near the town to be free. That's important to me. And even if you're not into shooting, you could apply it to hiking, fishing, hunting, just public land access. And public land without rules and fees. I'm not talking about and by God's grace, I can get into any national park for free because I'm a veteran. But I'm not talking about national parks. I'm not talking about even back east, a lot of places you have to pay to camp. No, I'm not talking about somewhere you have to pay to camp. That's ridiculous. I live as a nomad. I live off-grid anyway. I'm not going somewhere so I can pay to have electric hookup if I'm supposedly camping. Right? No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about open spaces. I'm talking about actual free wilderness. National forest, BLM land. That is important to me. Also, the culture of the town is important to me. And I was trying to think about how to gauge this and how to explain it because it may be hard to quantify. But when you walk into whatever one of their main stores are, Walmart, does it look like the majority of people, and anybody could have a bad day, right? But does it look like the majority of people in there are in the middle of carpe diem, right? They're in the middle of seizing the day, or does it look like the diem has carpe'd them quite a few times recently? Does it look like they're having an abundant life, or does it look like they've been defeated and going through life? That's important to me. So, and I don't know how to quantify this either, but kind of grunge culture. I don't know a better, more polite way to put it, but I was a law enforcement officer for quite a while and a drug recognition expert. I don't think you have to be a certified drug recognition expert by the government, but you look around and think, are drugs a major problem here? And that's pretty easy to discern. I got off in what I think was a fairly small town in Virginia on my way cross country, and it was somewhere kind of scenic and seemed like it would have been a nice small town, but I got out, and aside from the trees and the mountains, I was like, did I just get out back in southeast LA? Right? Am I around Newton Division, the ghetto in LA? Where am I? That's not, I don't want to live in that kind of town or around that kind of town. Of course, almost any town with any number of people are going to have some people that are on drugs. That's just law of averages. But I'm talking about where it seems like, for lack of a better term, drugs have gotten a better part of the town. A place, by God's grace, my wife and I would want to be a family, and we're, by God's grace, going to have kids one day, if that's his plan for us. But somewhere we wouldn't mind raising a kid, right, and letting them run around Main Street. I'm talking about the downtown Main Street. And a lot of downtown Main Streets kind of went away, and then they came back. So is it one that just never went away and it's doing pretty good? There are businesses and stuff, or is it one that's dead? The town when I grew up as a boy, and it was a charming old school town in the south, but the Main Street was pretty much dead. I think there was a hardware store down there and a bunch of abandoned, beautiful old buildings. But a charming Main Street with some stuff to do, because that's not really me. I'd rather be out in the wilds around the town, but I love my wife, and sometimes she likes to go sit for a nice cup of coffee. Sometimes she likes to, convince me to make sure I don't have a bunch of blood or something on my shirt and go into town, and I'll sit down, and I don't generally drink, but sit down while she has a nice glass of wine and we'll just talk. And I love my wife, and I'm happy to do that for her. But some things to do in the downtown area, like the old school downtown area, that's a pretty good gauge for how the town is doing, I think. Is it rusty and dead, or is it having a revival, or is it healthy? These are some of the things that I considered when I came up with my best towns in America. I should also caveat real quick before I get into the towns. I know it's a long preamble, but I think it's important. I've been to 49 of the states. I've lived in a bunch of them. I try to go to a bunch of different towns and visit a bunch of different towns and spend time in a lot of these towns that I think might interest me. But I'm sure there's some that I haven't been to, right? So just disclosure there. All right, first on my list, these aren't going to be in exact order, but kind of from really good towns to towns I like slightly better. Because you really can't quantify this on like a spreadsheet, right? Not really a lot I can quantify on Excel here. But Petersburg, Alaska. Petersburg, Alaska is rugged and wild and beautiful, and just walking out the door and looking around is breathtaking. Petersburg, Alaska is beautiful. I lived in Petersburg. I really liked a lot of things about Petersburg. It's wild. It's rugged. It's Alaska. And I went to multiple places in Alaska, but sadly, Alaska, most of the places I went to, I think I would mark off for that grunge vibe. And you might think Alaska wild and beautiful, but if you're talking about the towns, a lot of those seem to have a pretty prolific crime, drug culture going on. If you look at the violent crime rate in Alaska, it's fairly high. But I did not get that impression in Petersburg. Petersburg, Alaska is gorgeous, small town. It is breathtaking. You can get there from the Alaska Ferry. It's in southeast Alaska, so unlike a lot of what you're thinking of in Alaska, it does not get crazy harsh winters. In fact, I would rather do a winter in Petersburg than in most of the Midwest. It's a rainforest. It's a temperate rainforest, and it's beautiful and it's breathtaking, and you could pick more blueberries than you could ever eat. Not to mention hunting and things like that. Now, why it's fairly low on the list is that there are roads to nowhere. Like there's roads around town, but you can't leave. It's an island or a very isolated peninsula with no roads to the mainland. So you aren't driving anywhere. The vast majority of people that live there are fishermen, commercial fishermen, and that's no problem with that. I grew up, I did that when I was younger. My father's a commercial fisherman, his father before him, but not really what I wanted to do in life. So fishing there is a big part of the culture and a big part of the diet, and I like fishing too, but what I don't actually like are larger vessels. I don't like the upkeep on them. I don't like the maintenance on them. I don't want that to be a big chunk of my life. And most of the people that live there have boats. It's what that place is kind of known for, fishing and salmon. If you're really into fishing and salmon fishing and halibut and stuff, this might be number one on your list. But the fact that it's a little closed off and it was a little too isolated from my wife, she really liked it, but the fact that, it might take 4 to 6 weeks, Amazon Prime there is like 4 to 6 weeks, not a couple of days. So it is beautiful, but I think if I were going to live there, you would kind of need a boat or a plane. And I don't really have any desire to have a plane, and I don't really have a desire to have a big boat. I like small vessels, I like canoes, I like kayaks, I love that kind of stuff. But if you want to get to really anywhere else in Alaska, it's kind of hard. So it's very isolated. But it's one of the few places in Alaska where it just seemed really safe and everybody was super friendly, and it was very, very breathtakingly beautiful, and it was rugged and wild and still had a really cool, nice culture. And there was stuff to do downtown. You walk around downtown. Hammer and Wiccan, it's kind of like a little local chain there. Now groceries are going to be high there because it's Alaska, but you're probably, if you're moving to Alaska, hopefully doing a lot of foraging and hunting and fishing. But it's gorgeous. It's a gorgeous little place. Super, super friendly people. Some of the most friendly in the country. Okay. Next on my list is a town that I was in when I started thinking about this. When I was rucking last night out in the hills, out in the area around Deadwood, South Dakota. Now, I would consider the Wild West starting on the western side of the Dakotas. The eastern Dakotas don't interest me as much. If you want like small town farming country America, the people in the Dakotas are super nice. Give you an idea, when I'm traveling, I still like to stop and get some workouts in when I'm going through cities, and I have a key that'll get me into Anytime Fitness because you pay for the thing and you get the access and it's anytime. So it doesn't matter if I roll into town at 1 in the morning, I can get a workout in if I want. Anyway, just give you an idea of like South Dakota and how much the culture is pretty cool there. When I pulled into one of the Anytimes there, they're all set up a little bit different, but one of these just had like an open cooler refrigerator where you open the front and it just had a box full of money on the table. Like, you take this, you leave this much. There's a box of money sitting on the table, a box of, like a refrigerator cooler full of beverages, energy drinks, whatever people drink at the gym, besides water, and just a box of money on the table. And I thought, well, you're probably not going to see that in Chicago, right, or a lot of other places, back east. It's just a different place. So if you're looking for that, the Dakotas are great. But I would consider the more wild part of the Dakotas my favorite, and I like the western parts of Dakotas, and I really, really like the Black Hills. The cool thing about the Black Hills is in that kind of transition zone from the Great Plains into mountains. The Black Hills are just rugged and beautiful, and I've spent time living up in the Black Hills, and I've been to Deadwood more than once. Now, Deadwood's a little kind of touristy town. It's known for, the Deadwood Gold Rush back in the day, and Wild Bill and all that stuff, which is cool, and that's fine, but there is stuff to do downtown. So it's because of the touristy thing, it's got a little bit going on downtown, so you could actually go and go do some town stuff, and then I can go and I could probably explore just that one little area in the Black Hills for the rest of my life hiking around and be plenty of wild. So the Dakota culture are really cool. The people that live there seem happy, getting back to like the Carpe Diem kind of thing. It's just a cool place. And of towns that I like in the Dakota, South Dakota especially, and Deadwood. I like Deadwood. I especially like it because the Black Hills around it. I would rather be in the Black Hills than in the town of Deadwood, but the fact that you have a nice little town and you have that rugged, wild Black Hills where I can go drink out of a stream like I did last night, hiking in the middle of the night up in the wilds of the Black Hills. It's gorgeous. There's plenty of public open land, which means if you're an American citizen, that's your land. You can just go up there, just hang out. I like that. Next one on my list, Telluride, Colorado. It is beautiful. You think of like the Alpine Switzerland and put that in America and put that in the American West and the Rocky Mountains. That's Telluride. Telluride is just stunningly beautiful. The views there are just amazing. Telluride is great. The land around there is great. It gets a lot of snow in the winter. And talking about Alaska, like I'd rather probably spend a winter in Petersburg than a winter in Telluride. Telluride's up in the mountains. It gets a lot of snow. But Telluride is gorgeous. And because it's a ski place, I don't even ski. That's not even why it's on my list. I would rather be out, hunting. Stalking elk or something. But Telluride is gorgeous. And the thing I like about Telluride is it's got a pretty happening downtown. Like, you can go walk around downtown. It's a good, healthy downtown. Have you a nice cup of coffee, sit, look up at the mountains. But also, it's on the western slope of the Rockies, whereas the big chunk of the population in Colorado, that whole Denver metro area, is on the eastern side of the Rockies. You got to cross the Rockies to get there, so it's pretty far away from that Denver area. Now, as far as big cities go, Denver's not the worst, but again, the cities are not what we're talking about. So it's pretty far away and isolated from that. It's the complete other side of the Rockies. So Telluride, Colorado, it is gorgeous, it is rugged, it is breathtakingly beautiful. Colorado's got some good hunting. Colorado has turned a little bit liberal, but I'd still rather live there than a people hive with a ton of people back east where you got all that free and open land. The elk hunting there is kind of like world renowned. It's beautiful. It doesn't have quite the variety of species of some of the other states I'm going to talk about, but especially if you like elk hunting, Colorado, gorgeous. Next, let's switch gears and go to the desert Southwest. Sedona, Arizona. You just talk about beautiful. It's like every time you drive, beautiful in a completely different way than like Telluride or some of the other places, certainly than Petersburg, Alaska. But you just look around and you are just slapped by the beauty of nature. It is just gorgeous in a completely different way. Semi-arid, dry, unlike like the Phoenix area of Arizona, which is really, really hot. It's much less hot here. I prefer the heat, actually. Like I would rather be outside operating in 110 rather than 40 degrees. That's just me. But it's not as deserty. It's a lot more of a less hostile climate than like the Phoenix, that whole area, and all the surrounding area that has kind of grown into the Phoenix metro area. It's quite a ways away from there, so that's nice. But Sedona is just gorgeous, and there's a bunch of public land around there. I lived there a couple of times, just literally living out in the bush, out in the desert, harvesting agave and hunting, and it's gorgeous. Sedona is great. Now, the caveat here is that Sedona is kind of known for its hippie culture. So if that's really going to upset you, then this is probably not the place for you. But it doesn't bother me, other than the pagan garbage idolatry that gets put into that. Because that gets put into a lot of today's culture. Like all the false deity worship and all the Eastern, false worship and false religion garbage. I could burn that to the ground, honestly. But other than that, because a lot of cities you're going to find that kind of stuff, yoga and whatever. It's a beautiful, beautiful town, and it's a thriving downtown, and there is like a hippie-ish part of it, which if you're a Christian hippie, rock on, man. I'm all about that. But there's kind of that part, but there's also like the cowboy, rugged western part too, which is really cool. There's also a lot of, again, open, beautiful land around there, and unlike a lot of Arizona, there's water. Like, if you ever go over, and I used to live around Beaver Creek, which is just gorgeous, like some of the most beautiful landscapes, and the weather's nice. It's usually sunny, it's usually warm. There's plenty of open land to explore, plenty of food to forage if you know what you're looking for. It also exists in kind of this big chasm between mountains, so you get a lot more shade there, which may not seem like a big deal, but if you ever spend a lot of time in the desert Southwest, in the Mojave Desert and the Sonoran Desert, shade is a tremendous blessing, and you can get a lot more of it when you have a lot more vertical structure, which Sedona is kind of known for. These beautiful kind of giant rock landscapes lend itself to more shade and stuff like that. It's also kind of a hiker's just wonderland. So if like hiking and backpacking is your thing, Sedona it's got the trails with touristy and like marked trails, but I try and stay off of those. It's got plenty of make your own adventure trails around Sedona, and all that whole area around Sedona, Cottonwood, that whole area is just gorgeous. But if I'm picking a town, I'm going to pick Sedona because it does have a thriving downtown. I think you get a lot of people trying to get out of the desert for the weekend from that Phoenix area, get away from the crowded big city and go up there. It is gorgeous, and it's got that thriving downtown. There's plenty of stuff to do, and it's just stunningly beautiful. And it's kind of a different landscape and I've been all over the West, and I love the West, but it's a totally different landscape than pretty much anywhere else. It's just very unique and very beautiful. I'm also going to quickly mention Jerome, because it's not going to make the list, but it's fairly close there. So if you're going to check it out, check out Jerome as well. It's an old ghost town that's been restored. It's really cool. All right, next on the list, Leavenworth, Washington. Now, this is nowhere near Seattle. This is nowhere near Portland. It is a beautiful, kind of in the middle of Washington, rugged mountains. You talk about some of the most stunning mountain landscapes, it's here. It's gorgeous. It is maybe not as dramatic as Telluride, but it's quite stunning. Also, this is kind of, this might be your thing if you're into the whole German culture, German cottage, if you really like that kind of aesthetic. My wife is German. She really likes this town, which I think her love of it got it on this list. I don't know that I would have went there without her urging me to, but what I like about it is there's just a vast amount of beautiful, rugged, wild land around there, and most people don't go there. Most people that go to that town, they go to, like, do the little German touristy downtown thing. Like, oh, it's a cool old German village restored, and that's really cool. But I'm out there hiking in the mountains, almost nobody's out there. I found an old abandoned church, found an old abandoned mining stuff, old abandoned mines, tunnels, just exploring out there while we lived there. It was great. Now, granted, it is Washington, so you run into all the Washington laws and stuff like that. But it's just gorgeous, and there is a ton of land around there. And Washington can have some good hunting as well. Also, some good fishing. There's it's just a lot of water to fish there, especially if you're into like the fly fishing, trout fishing. That's great there. As I should point out, would have been in the case in Telluride as well. But Leavenworth, Washington, it's got that good mix. If you like being out, wild man living in the mountains, elk and just abandoned mines and exploring and doing all that kind of stuff, and then you also want to go to a quaint little German village that's really cool. Like, I generally don't do the touristy thing, but just my wife really liked it. She liked walking around there and going to get a cup of coffee and sitting and looking at the mountains around the town. And again, I love my wife. I'm happy to do that stuff for her as well. So it's a really cool mix. Leavenworth, Washington. Now, the first town on my list in my favorite state. My favorite state, and I've, again, been to 49 of them, lived in a bunch of them, is Idaho. By far, I keep going back to Idaho, keep moving back to Idaho after I go other places. Just the more I see of the rest of the country, the more I love Idaho. Because Idaho is just stunningly beautiful. And it's got a good mix of culture and laws and all that stuff. But I don't want to turn this into a greatest states episode. That maybe should be its own. But it's a fantastic mix. It is just amazing. Anyway, the first town in Idaho on the list, and they're not all from now on going to be in Idaho, but this first one, Kamiah. Kamiah is really, really high on my list. In fact, my number one bug out location, which I share with the patrons, like in the country. Like if the stuff really hits, the peanut butter and chocolate really hits the fan, I have an area outside of Kamiah. That's where I would go, provided there weren't any other extraneous circumstances and I could get there. That'd probably be my go-to for now. Kamiah, Idaho is gorgeous. It's on the Clearwater River. What's really cool about it is it's in northern Idaho, as all the ones in here. Southern Idaho is not bad either. It's a lot more high deserty, and what you would think of as, maybe you have no idea what to think of about Idaho. But northern Idaho goes all the way up the Canadian border, and Kamiah is south of the Canadian border and just west of Montana. And it is gorgeous. It's it's off the Clearwater River, and it's on the western edge of the Bitterroot Range. And it is just beautiful. And unlike a lot of places this far north, and like a lot of Montana, it has fairly mild winters, which is fantastic. It's not, winters like Sedona, Arizona, but it's got very mild winters for as high as it is, and as, in the Bitterroot Range as it is. You have giant mountains. You have beautiful, beautiful, Clearwater River and other waterways around there. You have, literally, there's more wilderness around there than I would probably explore my entire lifetime, spending big chunks of my time out there. There are several, wilderness areas around there, national forests around there. It is fantastic. I really like it. Why isn't it higher on the list? It's barely a town. right? It does have a really, really nice family-run coffee shop. It is awesome. There's a couple of little stores there. There's a casino there even. And it's a decent downtown. Certainly a safe downtown. There's just not a lot. It's like the bare minimum to make the list, which is why it's not higher. That coffee shop there is really, really cool. If you ever drive through there, stop just for the coffee. I wish I could remember the name, but it's like the one decent coffee shop. But Kamei, that coffee shop alone is like half of the town stuff to do there that I think is worth it. But there's also decent stuff around there. There's 2 different places to buy guns. It's not crazy small. There are a couple of stores. It is, I think, the entire town itself. I don't know about the entire town, but a big chunk of the town, maybe all the businesses that I'm aware of, are located on the Nez Perce Indian Reservation. So you're actually on the res. That may or may not be a go or no-go for you. I mean, I, as a pale face, had no issues there. In fact, it was one of the friendliest towns I've been to in the country, I think. Maybe outside of the Dakotas. Those are pretty friendly. But super friendly. But Kamei, Idaho is just gorgeous. The town is not so much, but if you want a rugged, wild place where you can get the bare essentials in town and then go live as a wild man, or just look for some really remote property, Kamei is... If it wasn't for my wife wanting to do more stuff in a town, and she's real simple too, but... Also, there is a gym there, but it was closed when we lived there, and I don't know if they're going to reopen it or what, so I guess maybe it shouldn't even be on the list, because I mentioned in the beginning a gym. There is a gym there, but it is closed, so I don't know if it's permanently closed or what. But Kamei, Idaho is just stunning. The Bitterroot Range, think of like really green Rocky Mountains. It's gorgeous. They do have a little museum there, which is really cool. There used to be mammoths around there, so they got like a mammoth remains thing, and just the history of the town is really cool. They also have a really cute small town library. Good fishing, world-class hunting. It's a beautiful area. Kamei. Okay, let's head out of Idaho for now and go to the coast. This is number 3 on my list. Number 3 on my list, Gold Beach, Oregon. Yes, Oregon. Gold Beach, Oregon is, as far as natural beauty and just the culture and the climate, it's really cool. As far as like, if you take government out of the equation, just natural resources, it is amazing. Berries everywhere. My wife and I would just go pick blackberries, and there's just innumerable acres and acres of blackberries everywhere. Not to mention a bunch of other kind of berries. But Gold Beach is right on the Rogue River, so you get that really cool convergence of different things. You get that beautiful freshwater river, the Rogue River, which is gorgeous for swimming, for just clean water. You get really giant trees. You also get the ocean. It's Gold Beach. You get the ocean right there, the giant Pacific Ocean, giant rugged coastline. And it's not like if you're used to the beaches back east where like there's people. Like you might walk for who knows how long and not see a person. It is rugged and beautiful and wild and just gorgeous. What's cool about it is if you've ever spent time on like the Pacific Northwest, it can be kind of chilly even in the summertime. But if you go just a little bit inland on the Rogue River, it gets a lot more sun. So you can kind of pick and choose within a few miles the kind of climate that you want. And it is just gorgeous. You get the ocean. I really love the ocean. You get the beach if you want to go walk around on the beach. From giant starfish, actually giant, but really big starfish, seals, the kelp, all that kind of stuff. If you want to do the ocean fishing kind of thing, then the Rogue River is just kind of known for really good fishing. And it's very sparsely populated. It is nowhere near Portland or Salem or anywhere else. It's really, really remote. It's really rugged, and it's on the coast, and it's got a fantastic climate. It's got a ton of natural resources. As far as climate goes, it's probably the most... Well, Sedona's pretty good too, but that depends on if you like the heat. But it's got a fantastic climate as well. But Gold Beach, Oregon is just awesome. I really like it. And the downtown is really cute. My wife and I still joke about that downtown and the little fair. There is one like city-run gym there. It's not bad. Like, it's got equipment that you can use. The actual library there is really nice library for the size of the town. They had a little fair there, and like their summer fair, which is just adorable. And there is tons of rugged wild land. Talking about just going just right outside of town and setting up my own shooting range and shooting. We lived there for quite a while. Really liked it. We were actually looking for land around there, and then they passed that Proposition 14 thing, which was just ridiculous with the... Anyway, so with the gun laws and stuff, and so we decided, maybe not, so we left. But we were really actually looking to settle there, as how much we like it. It's fantastic. The culture there is, if you've ever been to Portland, the culture there is nothing like Portland. That's more that grungy culture, drug culture kind of that I talked about in the beginning. This Gold Beach is beautiful and very cool, very small townish. It's just gorgeous. Next on the list, Bonners Ferry. Bonners Ferry, Idaho is right on the very tip top. There might be another little small hamlet or something just north of there, but Bonners Ferry is your last any kind of sizable city in Idaho before you get to the Canadian border. So Canadians, if you're looking for some freedom, you might check out Bonners Ferry. Americans, if you're looking for some wild, you might look at Bonners Ferry. Bonners Ferry is, again, right up on the Canadian border, west of Montana in Idaho. It's beautiful there. It's going to have a little bit colder winter. Like, it's going to have cold winters. Not as cold as you might be thinking, but fairly cold. But you talk about surrounded by rugged beauty. Also, Bonners Ferry downtown seems to be coming back. It's still got a lot of empty, vacant businesses, but there is stuff there. There is a decent gym around there. There is stuff to do there. It's not dead. There is stuff to do. And it's just beautiful. And my wife even liked it, and she didn't think she was going to like it. It's so rugged. So beautiful. Talking about really wild country right on the Canadian border. I don't remember if it's on the border of... I've been up there, been up through Canada. I don't remember if it's on the border of British Columbia or of Alberta. I think it's fairly close to the border of both of those. It actually may be... I think if you just go straight north from there, you end up in British Columbia. But if you're wanting to go... you live somewhere but travel into Canada, then it's an easy drive to Canada. It's maybe 20 miles, maybe a little bit more than that, I don't remember, from the border of Canada, but it's an easy drive. You got water, you got good hunting, you got fishing, you got the freedom and the laws of Idaho, right? And Idaho's got some of the best as far as diversity of hunting outside of Alaska that you can. It's got moose, it's got elk, it's got whitetail, it's got mule deer, it's got sheep, it's got grizzly bear, it's got black. You can't hunt a grizzly bear. It's no grizzly bear season, but there's grizzly bear, there's mountain lion season, black bear season, wolf, there's pheasant, there's quail, there's dove, there's grouse. It's just talk about diversity, and it is awesome. And there's a lot of rugged wild land, and especially around Bonners Ferry. That applies to the other towns in Idaho I'm going to talk about, but Bonners Ferry is up in the very north. The reason it's not higher on the list, there's not as much to do downtown, and it's got a colder winter. Now, favorite town in the country, both for my wife and I think it is our combined favorite. And I really like it as well, and that is Moscow, Idaho. Moscow, Idaho is just amazing. It's a very unique landscape. Think of the beautiful rolling hills of Ireland. It's one of the few places in the country where they can still farm without irrigation or anything like that. It's just gorgeous, like lush rolling hills, really rich, fertile topsoil. And it's again, still northern Idaho, so you're surrounded by that rugged, wild beauty. It's got plenty of open land around there. It's got plenty of national forest, wilderness area, just gorgeous. This is right up there in that chimney as well. It's a little bit closer to the Washington side than the Montana side, but Moscow is it's got just a really cool climate. It's got a really mild climate, which is why it's also really high on the list. You get the rugged beauty and the solitude of being in northern Idaho, but you get a really gentle climate. And, it's not going to have as nice winters as, Sedona, Arizona, but it's going to have a lot better summers. It's got a very gentle climate. That rolling Palouse Hills, it's a stunningly beautiful area. So you get these beautiful, lush, fertile hills surrounded by rugged, mountainous terrain. And also, in about a half an hour, you can drop down into the Columbia River Gorge, which is its own kind of completely different beauty, right? So I believe, double check this, but I believe the deepest canyon in the country is not actually Grand Canyon, it's Hell's Canyon. And Hell's Canyon is just south of Moscow, Idaho. Just Lewiston didn't make the list. Lewiston is a little too big for me. But it's just north of Lewiston, Idaho, which has a lot of good stuff going for it as well. But Moscow, Idaho, it's where the University of Idaho is. So if you don't want a college town, it's not like a giant college town. And it's just Idaho College, so a little bit different than some other colleges. But that also gives it a thriving downtown. It's probably the healthiest, our favorite downtown, which is what I think we both really like about it. And it's just a really cool downtown. There's a lot of really cool, little coffee shops. They've got a really cool place called, I always mispronounce it. I say Butchers, but I think it's Buchers, B-U-C. Anyway, it's got a weird spelling, but I just say Butchers. But it's a little cool, bar / bookstore / coffee shop. Kind of a weird dynamic, but it works. And I can go in there, sit and read my Bible and have a cup of coffee. My wife can go in there and have a glass of wine. A lot of times there's live music in the front half and it's more quiet towards the back half, so you can kind of pick. Do you want to be interactive in live music, or do you want to go a little bit farther in the back and be quiet and have conversation? It's just really cool. And that's just one example of one thing there. For such a small town, it's got a pretty thriving degree of things that you can do there. It's got a tri-state, which is a fairly small chain up in that part of the country. Got a really good little gun store, or it's not even little, it's a decent sized gun store for such a small town. Also, they did and I never noticed this until my wife pointed it out, I think, but they did a really good job, I guess, civil engineering that town, whatever you would call it. But it's got a lot of really cool biking trails, hiking trails. So if hiking and biking on a trail is your kind of thing around town, they did a really good job of having that. And it's a pretty active, people there are pretty active and healthy, talking about the Carpe Diem thing. When you go into a store there, you're yeah, it's a nice, healthy place to live. A lot of activities, you got all those, there's a lot of parks, again, talking about the engineering, a lot of parks, a lot of trails, let your kids ride on if you've got kids and bikes and that sort of thing. And you can also go and be free up in the mountains. I hunted a lot around there this year, and I remember during, I was hunting, it was archery elk season, and I was up in the mountains, and this is within an easy drive of the town, and I hiked for hours and hours and hours, and it was snow, fairly fresh snow, so I was using it to track mountain lion. I got distracted from the elk, but I got on what I thought were some fairly hot mountain lion tracks, and I walked for I don't know how long, and just mile after mile after mile. Not only did I not see a person, I didn't see a single other human footprint. That is what I'm talking about. That's wild. That's rugged. I like that. I did see, I think 6, if I remember correctly, really beautiful big bull elk. I just didn't get close enough to seal the deal with a bow. But that's the tag that I had. I didn't get my residency till late in the year, and what I got was an archery elk tag. But anyway, it was a lot of fun anyway. And I did quite a bit of hunting, successful hunting there this year. Again, Idaho is really great for hunting and fishing and outdoor stuff. A lot of people, when they think I think especially back east, you say Idaho and they think of like Indiana or Iowa or somewhere in the Midwest. Idaho is west of Montana. Like I'm driving west through Montana right now to get to Idaho. It is rugged, wild, beautiful country. Especially southern Idaho is nice too, but northern Idaho I prefer. And northern Idaho is a lot, not that Idaho is very populated anyway, but northern Idaho is really sparsely populated. It is, talk about population density and that whole equation in resources and survival country. Northern Idaho is awesome. So anyway, that's number one on my list, Moscow, Idaho. Favorite town in the United States that I have spent any significant amount of time in, that I well, let's just say for now, that's number one on my list. Subject to change, right? But there you go. A list of just favorite towns in America. With that, to every American, if you're listening, but especially if you're a veteran, you fought for this country. I fought for this country. You served the country. Get out and see some of the country that you fought for and served for, defended. Go see some of the country. Even if you don't plan on living as a nomad like me, go visit some places that maybe one of those places appeals to you more than the other. But hopefully you get a chance to see some of this beautiful country. On that, your tactical tip of the day, and it could vary, there could be exceptions, but in general, you can stay in one spot in National Forest for up to 2 weeks. So you might want to take advantage of that. You got millions of acres of wilderness and National Forest, like millions, and I don't even know how much, but more than you and I could explore in a lifetime, with boots on the ground. So get out there. You can stay a lot of places for free, National Forest or BLM land and things like that for, I think, up to 14 days at a time. So you might want to take advantage of that if you're not hip on the staying in a hotel kind of thing. That's your tactical tip of the day about staying on National Forest, National Park, or National Forest BLM land. Your tactical verse of the day. They declared plainly that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. Remember, we were blessed to get a body and to walk around on God's beautiful creation, under the firmament on the beautiful creation that God made as our habitation for now. But our home that we're looking forward to should be heaven. We are strangers and pilgrims on the earth. And I think it would be beneficial for us to remember that and live like that. Not just give a token nod to, oh yeah, my citizenship is in heaven, but like living like that. Like naked you came into this world, naked you're going out of it, you're not taking any of the cool stuff with you. Like we're strangers and pilgrims on the earth. And I'm not saying you have to live like a nomad like me. Most people don't. But I think it is healthy that you remember that your first allegiance is to God. Right? You should not love any place, any building, any home, anything more than God. Many times throughout history, a real obvious example is Abraham. God calls and says, go, lead. So I don't know if that's ever going to happen for you, but if it does, hopefully it's not even a debate for you. You know to follow God rather than your love for God should far exceed love for any place. And I guess that's a good place to end it. Thank you for listening, and have a blessed day. Hidden track. Remember those from the old CD days? If you want to go even earlier, postscript, P.S. I'm going to do a dual tactical tip and a dual verse of the day because I wanted to let you guys know about some other content. So I hope you liked this episode. Favorite cities. Now, if you want to support, become a patron. Patrons get a lot of cool insider-only content. I also did an additional Patreon-only episode in addition to this with places that didn't meet the criteria on both sides. Like places that are just beautiful and striking but aren't really towns. They're just maybe a hamlet. Or even a list of really bigger places, like more population that I think are decent. So I did that for the patrons. If you want to consider becoming a patron, supporting the show, I would appreciate having you. It would be a blessing. With that, your tactical tip of the day. If you're like me and you like to travel, vehicle maintenance is kind of a thing. Don't just assume that kit that came with your vehicle with the spare tire. First of all, know how to change a tire. I assume you know how to change a tire if you're listening to Alpha Male Podcast. If not, get on that. We all had to learn sometime. So I'm not trying to shame you if you don't, but learn how to change a tire. But in addition to that, don't just assume that kit that comes with your vehicle is always going to be okay. One, you might want to get a tire patch kit. Those are cheap, and sometimes it's just more convenient to patch the tire. Plug a tire is probably more accurate. Plug the tire and get somewhere safe and do it properly than to try and change a tire in some soft dirt or something. With that said, you might want to look at getting a better jack. Also, some spare pieces of wood. Sounds simple, but that can really come in handy when jacking up a vehicle, especially on less than level flat ground. Like if you're in a parking lot, okay. But if you're off on a soft shoulder or something, you might want something more sturdy to put the jack on so it doesn't slip and kill you or injure you. That'd be really bad. And less bad, like fall on the vehicle without the tire on it. So there's that. And also, if you do any kind of aftermarket things with tires or rims or wheels or whatever, make sure that the tool that came with your vehicle actually still works. You know, it'd stink to have the spare and have the kit and then that tire iron doesn't actually fit your lug nuts anymore. So check that as well. Anyway, your tactical tip of the day for some vehicle emergency roadside stuff. Your tactical verse of the day. This is part of Psalm 142. I cried out to you, Lord. I said, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Give your attention to my cry, for I have been brought very low. Rescue me from my persecutors. Now the whole Bible is beautiful, but focusing on one small part of that psalm, you are my portion in the land of the living. Whatever you might possess in this world, the most important thing to have is God, a relationship with the one who made you. That's our true treasure here on this earth. With that, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.